So something really big just happened in the world of banking, and you probably didn't hear a thing about it. In 2024, the folks who regulate global banks quietly made a decision that could fundamentally change how we think about a safe bank.
To get what's going on, you first have to understand something called a Tier 1 asset. Now, think of this as a bank's ultimate emergency toolkit. It's the absolute highest quality, most dependable stuff a bank owns. It's there to soak up huge losses in a crisis, so the bank doesn't just collapse. We're talking about things like cash and super stable government bonds, the bedrock of financial safety.
Okay, so this is a very exclusive club, right? For the safest of the safe. So you'd think any new member would have to be incredibly stable, super reliable. Well, the new asset that just got a VIP pass might just shock you.
Yup, gold. That shiny, famously volatile, and let's be honest, speculative metal is now officially considered one of the safest things a bank can hold. And in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly why that might be the shiniest mistake in modern banking.
Now, at first glance, you might think, wow, that's a huge vote of confidence in gold. But as we're about to see, giving gold this elite status might actually be like injecting risk directly into the heart of the very system it's supposed to protect.
So, how did this even happen? Well, global regulators, as part of these big international banking rules, just reclassified physical gold. It's now in the same safety bucket as actual cash. This means banks can now count their gold bars as part of their core capital buffer. You know, the stuff that's supposed to keep them from failing. Now, to be fair, there are some limits. It's capped based on how risky a bank's other investments are. But still, the message this sends is huge.
And that leads us right to the heart of it. Let's walk through the 4 biggest reasons why letting gold into this exclusive club is, well, probably a really bad idea.
This scorecard really tells the story in a single glance. When you stack gold up against what a real Tier 1 asset is supposed to be, well, look at all those missing check marks. Stability? Nope. Easily usable in a crisis? Not really. It just doesn't have the DNA of a true safety asset.
And that brings us to reason number 1, and it's a big one. Tier 1 assets are supposed to reduce risk, not add to it. And gold, at its core, is an incredibly volatile commodity. And you don't even have to take my word for it. These charts scream it. On the left, just look at gold's price history. It's all over the place, with these massive peaks and valleys. And on the right, the data proves it. Gold's volatility is right up there with the S&P 500 stock index. I mean, come on, that's not a safety buffer. That's a roller coaster.
Okay, but what about the classic argument? You know the one. Gold is the ultimate safe haven when everything else is falling apart. Well, it's a nice story, but the data tells a very, very different tale.
When you actually look at the last 50 years of data, gold's performance during crises is, well, it's pretty underwhelming. In fact, it often gets crushed by boring old US Treasury bills during major market meltdowns. Its performance is just not reliable when you need it the most. Calling it a hedge is being generous. It's kind of like a coin toss that just has really, really good PR.
Point number 3, and this is so important. Gold has no anchor. See, a bond pays you interest. Cash is worth, well, cash. Gold's value is based on what people feel it's worth. It's based on stories, on sentiment, on vibes. And let me tell you, when a bank is in trouble, you can't recapitalize it with good vibes. You need assets with a real solid floor, and gold just doesn't have one.
And this brings us to the really scary part, the slippery slope. The moment you let gold in, a commodity with a great story but shaky fundamentals, you've changed the rules of the game. If a good narrative is all that matters, what's next? What other assets are going to start lobbying to get into the club?
But you know, maybe the most mind-boggling part of this whole thing isn't just what the regulators did, it's when they did it. I mean, the timing here is just, wow. You really have to see the historical data to believe it. Because this decision, this blessing of gold as a top-tier safety asset, it isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening right now. And as we're about to see, the timing could not possibly be worse.
Take a good look at this chart. It shows gold's price, but adjusted for inflation. The regulators are literally rolling out the red carpet for gold at the exact moment its real value is hitting a new all-time high. And history shows us crystal clear that these peaks are not launch pads. They're often the start of a long, long winter for gold prices.
And this timeline just drives that point home with a sledgehammer. If you bought gold at its peak in the 1930s, you waited almost 40 years just to break even after inflation. Bought at the peak in 1980? Enjoy your 28-year wait. Even the 2011 high took 12 years to get back to.
A bank's emergency fund can't afford to wait decades just to get back to zero. I mean, this quote from the source material just says it all, doesn't it? Buying gold at an inflation-adjusted peak isn't a strategy for being safe. It's like putting your money in a time capsule and just hoping for the best a few decades from now. That is the literal opposite of what a Tier 1 asset is for.
So, when you put all these pieces together, the crazy volatility, the weak performance in a crisis, the fact that it has no real valuation, and this historically awful timing, you have to start asking, what is the real motive here?
So let's just recap the verdict here. Gold injects wild swings where you need calm, it pays you nothing, it's a terrible bodyguard when you actually get attacked, and the regulators are welcoming it with open arms at what history tells us is the worst possible moment to buy.
And that all boils down to this one single gigantic question. Why on earth would the world's top banking regulators knowingly add an asset with all these problems into the very safety net of our financial system? What problem are they even trying to solve here?
And that's really the thought we want to leave you with. Once you accept gold, not because of the data, but because of its history and its story, you've completely changed the definition of safe. And if that's the new standard, you really do have to ask, why not seashells?